Alright, so I'm making a pair of scissor hands from the movie Edward Scissorhands for my daughter for her costume. So first thing I'm starting off with is tracing out her hands so I just have a reference to go back to if she's not around. And I'm just guessing on how long I would like these to be. Got some reference photos to go off of. So here I'm just laying out what the shapes of each of the scissor fingers will be. Again, though, I am just guessing and using the reference photos I have to do this. I don't feel like it needed to be, exactly to scale or anything because I'm actually making these smaller because they're going on smaller hands. But the paper made it easy to be able to just cut these out, and I could, easily go back and redo it if I needed to. I gauged that these were about 1 inch wide at the base, though, just because once these all get turned into the scissor fingers, they need to be able to slide over her hands inside of a glove. So once I got these cut out, I just went over and I started cutting out some strips out of some plexiglass that I had left over from a previous project. You can use cardboard, you could use wood strips, but this is what I had. And I just take these pieces of plexiglass and I'm going to sandwich them together to give myself two sides. And I'm just using some tape and CA glue to do this. This is a pretty quick and easy way to do repeat cuts and repeat templates. And you can just see that I'm laying those on there to make sure that they're where I need to be. And where I'm not using tape, there's still like a piece of plastic. So it's not that I'm gluing those together, there's just a piece of plastic there. And where there's no plastic, I obviously use tape. And from here, I take these and I use some spray adhesive to put my templates on here. This is just a trick that I've learned from watching YouTube and other makers. And it was quick and easy. And I didn't have to worry about those templates falling off when I go to cut them out. From here, I'm just going to use my bandsaw to cut these out. Use the tools that you have, and this is the tool that I had. Super quick, super simple for me to be able to cut these curves and cut these angles. And because those two pieces of plexiglass are glued together, I'm able to cut both sides at the same time and not have to waste a whole lot of time cutting out 10 pieces. Real quick, I'm just taking them to my belt sander and kind of sanding off some of the rough edges from cutting them on the bandsaw. The plexiglass is great, but it definitely has some issues. Here I am just splitting them apart and referencing them again to the drawing of her hand. So here I'm using some poster board to make where her fingers will actually end up sitting in a cavity. I determined that this would be a great material just because I'll be doing a process to make it stronger in the end. I determined 1 inch. I probably could have went 1 1/16, even 1 1/8, so that the scissors slid in it better, but I just modified the scissors to fit inside. So here I'm just folding it to make it into a square tube, and I do this one at a time though, and I cut them off based on the finger, and then I make these little slots here where it'll fold over to close it off so you don't see the tip of the glove or anything. I'm using hot glue to put them together, and then a little bit of CA or super glue to close off the cavity and hold it in place. Again, down the road you'll see that this was plenty for the structure, and you don't have to, I didn't feel like I had to do anything more structural to hold this together. So the reason, again, why I'm doing this one at a time is because each finger has its own little uniqueness to it, and I didn't want every exact one to be the same. Plus, cutting those little angles, I was kind of doing more custom. So again, that once it was all finished, not each and every single one looked like it was, copy and paste. So if you look there on the other side, I already got a whole side done. Good thing about doing something like this for YouTube is I could do a practice run and get my practice done. And you can see there me putting hot glue on the inside of that and then just sliding it right inside of what would initially be where her finger slides in. And then the last one, the thumb one, in my references, this was just not going to work with her size of hand. So I just made up a shape like a tiny shovel, and I heated it up to kind of bend it around so it didn't just look flat, and gave it some form. Definitely would have probably recommended using just some safety gloves because this got hot, and I'm just using a heat gun to heat that up and bend it around, just a screwdriver handle. And then once that's done, I just make a square tube for her finger to go into and just hot glue and CA glue that together. Now to give it some aesthetics, I just went and bought some scissors from like the dollar store, broke them apart, and once those are broken apart, I reference where I want them to sit on the fingers and just make a line to cut them off. You could use like a hacksaw or something to cut these, but again, I'm using the tools that I have. So I have just this quick metal bandsaw I set up, cut them down, and from there I go and I round off those edges. And then again, I'm just using hot glue to put those in place because of what I'm going to do to give this more strength. Now, I would note here that pay attention to what side of the hand you're doing it on, and make sure that you put those fingers on the right side or left side of each finger, just so that they don't clank together. Here, I'm just adding a little bit of aesthetics, giving them a little bit more detail, a little bit more form, using more of that plexiglass to kind of layer up a couple of the fingers and give them some more depth, just so, again, that each one is more individualized and doesn't look like I just, stuck some wood together. Again, hot glue and CA glue was my friend here. I preferred the hot glue just because it kind of cured quicker. I did seem to have a little issue with the CA glue, and that was probably just because I was going fast. From this point, this is where all the structure part of it comes. I'm using just some resin epoxy and coating the entire finger with it. And 1 or 2 coats is probably all you needed. I only did 1 coat because she's going to wear these one time and then they're going to sit on a shelf and look cool. So I wasn't concerned about them being worn for too long or being too overly handled. And you can see here I had a couple of the handles pop off, so I just quickly glued them back in place while I did this. And then once I was done, I went back and epoxied them all. Here I am just making sure that everything's cleaned up and don't have too many drips. Once these dry, I just take some sandpaper and quickly sand down any high points or drips just to clean them up a bit. Alright, for some little details, I just took some bolts and screws and I cut the heads off of them. I would definitely probably not suggest doing this unless you are comfortable around tools and have used them a lot. There are some better ways to do this. You could use some wood to make these details, but I just used what I had and again felt comfortable. I just take these and I super glue them into place to kind of again just give it some detail and some depth. I'm doing it mostly where the scissors meet the gloves and just some doohickeys here and there. And again, just pay attention to where your fingers are going to interact with each other so that these don't end up getting banged around too much. Some foresight was I continue to have my daughter put these on and off and kind of see where there'd be some problems in the end. All right, I'm starting with a coat of black on all of these. And you could do white. I could have just went straight and painted them silver. But if there was any wear and tear on these, I wanted the black to come through first rather than maybe the white or the clear of the plexi. So this is just a baseline, and I chose that I'd prefer to see black over maybe a white. Now you can see over there where I'm placing them, I made just this little holder for them to sit on so that I didn't have to worry about them like smudging or anything. Not that I'm being super particular about the paint job, but just to help from it sticking to anything. I also took the gloves that she's going to be wearing and painted them. I tried to avoid doing the very tips of the fingers just so that when I went to glue the fingers onto it, it would have something other than the paint to adhere to. This part, I would have preferred to just find some black leather gloves, but finding little leather gloves for a tiny person was not the easiest, so these work just fine, and I think they are actually better in the long run. So I use like a pewter type color to paint these silver. Really, it's just use whatever you're comfortable with. I liked a more dark silver to kind of give it a worn look, and each one just got coated. I was a little bit more particular when I did this, trying to avoid doing the scissor parts of it and doing more of the finger parts of it. And from there, you can see here I'm adding some brass or bronze to like the little detail pieces to again accentuate them and give it a little bit more depth. Added a little bit to the edges too to make it look rusty. Again, I learned this from watching someone else on YouTube. So I would note that this is more of just how much detail do you want to be invested into this. My daughter really wouldn't have cared if I did this or not, but I knew that I was going to actually keep these once she was done with it, and I did this for me. And I just think they make it look just a little bit cooler. So I just wiped that on, wiped it right off to kind of give it that rust appeal. And then here I'm going back and doing a little bit more detail inside of those little spaces, just darkening where the screw heads or whatnot would meet, and then wiping it off to kind of give it that worn look. Now, something I didn't do, but I probably should have, is putting some like layer of protection over this, like a Mod Podge or even like a polyacrylic, but I just left them like this and planned on them getting worn out. But as you can see, this is the effect that I was going for. So I highly suggest, if you're going to do this, to make sure that you're actually putting this on your hand when you do it, and that's why she's here. So I coated the inside with Quick and Set Tight Bond, and I would definitely recommend that glue. A couple reasons I use it is, one, it is thick. Second, it dries clear, and it also dries pretty fast. So coat the inside, and then I would kind of do a little bit on the fingers themselves just to make sure I had as much as possible. It's probably overkill, but I definitely don't want these to fall off because she moves a lot. And something I wanted her to also do that would be kind of hard to do if I was doing this place is fill that finger void all the way out. Plus she can wiggle them and kind of move those fingers inside that cavity. Now this was a rough part, was getting these off. But once those are off, I actually go back and fill them with like markers and fatter dowels just to keep that finger open. So what you'll notice here is something I was talking about earlier. The handles of those scissors are all on one side. And then I just kind of based that based on the hand that it was on. I feel that if I wouldn't have done that, they would have been clanking together quite a bit. The handles potentially been a breaking point. Having them all on one side kind of prevented that, and it just looks aesthetically better to me. But this is what I was talking about earlier. All right, and from this point, I end up adding like a little piece of fabric around the wrists, and that was just to give it a little bit more detail. He actually has wiring going from his fingers to like a wrist guard, but knowing my daughter was going to take these on and off, I did not want to play that game, but maybe in the future I'll do that. And her costume was made by my wife, which it just turns out amazing, as you'll see here in the end. And I really enjoyed this and hope to do maybe some more cosplay type stuff in the future. If you like this build, I'd really appreciate it if you liked, shared, and followed my channel. And I appreciate all those that watched all the way to the end. And you'll see her full costume here in just a second. Thanks for watching, guys.